All right, y'all. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shaunna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, the weather is 79 here, so let me have it. Let me have it. What's the weather there?
Hi, everyone. Pronouns she, hers. Good to be with you this week. I actually don't know. It's pretty gray as I look out of the window. My watch is not telling me, but I think it's going to be probably on par with your 79, is my guess. So, you know, toasty.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We had perfect weather this weekend. We had a track meet to attend, and the sky was perfectly blue and a breeze flowing. So let's just keep that going for the next few days. Let's keep that going.
Yep.
So,
Keep it going. Keep it going.
yes, yes. So, all right, we have a word of the week for us, and it directly connects. Hopefully, you've seen how it's connected with at least one or more of our phases. But this week, our word is suffrage. Suffrage. And Lisa, take us back to your political sciencey background and history and degrees. And like we've shared before on this podcast, you know so much more about U.S. elections and politics and government and so forth. And then I too about the UK. Interesting enough. I mean, like we're ships passing in the night here. But what's going on with suffrage? Because I've heard it a million times. I'm sure other people have heard the term, but getting clear on who it actually emphasizes. That's what I'm really interested in.
Yeah. So, most of you would probably be familiar with the term related to voting rights for women, right? Women's suffrage movement, both, in the UK and in the US and around the world. I remember learning about that in school, largely white women starving themselves in protest of not getting the vote and then being force fed. So that was quite gruesome. But ultimately, it's not tied to women, right? That's probably how we learn about it, but it isn't tied to women's identity. It ultimately means the right to vote in public elections. So to have suffrage, to have universal suffrage, means that everyone has the right to vote. So we don't technically have universal suffrage in the US, the UK, and other European countries, right? Because not every person gets the right to vote because there are age restrictions and other restrictions, like in the US and many states. If you're a felon, you don't get to vote. So, another, we might also hear political franchise or the franchise. That's all kind of connected to the word suffrage. And then obviously the opposite of universal suffrage would be disenfranchisement. And there's a lot of that happening in the United States in particular. Widespread disenfranchisement of low income people, people of color, people with felonies, formerly justice involved individuals. And there are both overt and covert ways in which that right to vote is trying to be withdrawn. And interestingly, fun fact, the Constitution has no affirmative right to vote. So the US Constitution, it's not in there. So there's the,
Wow.
um, yeah, the 15th, oh gosh, now I'm going to worry I'm getting this wrong. The 15th Amendment that gives the right to vote to formerly enslaved people. And then obviously the 19th Amendment for women, although at the time in 1920, not all women, but there's nothing affirmative that gives every single citizen of the United States the right to vote. That has come through case law. But is clearly tenuous because we got a whole lot of shenanigans happening in a whole lot of states. And why the 1965 Voting Rights Act was needed to try and guarantee universal suffrage to those who are 18 and older. So that's what I got, Shaunna. That's what I got.
Shenanigans. I mean, when shenanigans is in a definition, it's got to be good, right? I mean, but to your great point though, uh individuals who um, who could otherwise vote again, we have what has been deemed as the ultra election year because I think there's 66 different presidential and or senior leadership elections in the world. And so given that, we need to pay attention because, what we deem true in our home country may not be true elsewhere, but it certainly does affect the international connections or disconnections. So if you think that none of this really affects your life, haha, no. It definitely does affect your life. So I appreciate where you went with that, because again, thinking about the people who do not have the right to vote and the reasons why they are being denied such, it's a consideration, especially in this year. So, all right, well, let's get into phase one. And this was an interesting one, y'all, because we kind of went through our film and musical history. We went back in history to kind of look at a few things, but I hate to rain on everybody's parade, Lisa, but so many people have fond memories of the 1964 film Mary Poppins, right? Many people have a pleasant memory of that film, and some people even have seen it in other places, some on Broadway, lots of different places. But share with you what's going on. The rating for Mary Poppins has been changed due to some specific language. And, we usually think of Mary Poppins as being, very family oriented, wholesome. The whole family should be able to watch Mary Poppins. And now we've got kind of this side eye from British Board of Film classification. So it's very similar to our system that we use in the United States, where we may have a G-rated film, PG, R, etc. And so they have raised its rating from U, which would be our American equivalent of a G-rated film, up to a PG rating. All right, so you may be asking why? What is wrong with the film? I can't remember anything that's wrong with it. I watched it as a kid. I loved it. Well, based on the BBFC, there are two instances within the film where character uses the word hottentots. Okay, Hottentots, hottentots, and that phrase was used, and it kind of has this turn of phrase on it, Lisa, where it's almost a fun word to say if you don't know what it means. And I guarantee you, most people listening to this podcast don't know the original meaning of that word, but it feels like it would be a fun word, or even almost like alliteration a little bit with the word. But the problem is it's actually an antiquated slur term, Lisa. So if you go all the way back to the origination of the term, it actually connects with indigenous people from South Africa called the Khoi Khoi, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Khoe, Khoe, all one word. And so the BBFC specifically notes that this can be offensive because the Mary Poppins character, if y'all remember Admiral Boom used the term towards chimney sweeps and having their faces being blackened by soot from sweeping chimneys. And so the BBFC doesn't want kids running around using this language thinking that it's okay without knowing the history of the term. Now, Lisa, to your point, I have watched many a film with my sons, and I guarantee you we have missed some things when it comes to some terms or turns of phrase that could be offensive. And so it's interesting, right? I understand them changing the rating, but part of it is kind of like, we're going to keep our hands clean of this. If your kids learn these phrases, it's not going to be because we didn't give you an appropriate warning. So, Lisa, I don't know if you'd ever heard the term before. I know you're familiar with Mary Poppins, obviously, but what's your response to this? Because, as a
Mm-hmm.
parent, I kind of sort of get it, but I'm kind of creeped out by the fact that responsibility is kind of shifting. So, anyway, what do you think?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I missed the piece that it was the British film classification folks that had increased that rating. So did it not get increased in the USA? Did it not go up to from G to PG over here?
Good question. I'm not sure. Let me Google, but keep talking. That's an interesting question because
Yeah.
you're
So,
right. Yeah.
um, yeah, I think I have mixed feelings about it. Like, I'm glad that the word has been called out. I had absolutely no idea. It makes total sense, right? But then the degree to which anyone knows what that means, no matter their racial identity, I would imagine is quite low, since it's a antiquated word that is not in popular usage. And so I don't know that raising the rating changes that reality, right? So okay, my kid could go to watch this if it was a replay at a movie theater, they could go watch it without the adult, right? And they might pick up the word and not have any sense of its association. And I, as the parent, don't know the association, so I'm not going to respond if they come home and they start using the word, right? In and then, but if I go with them to the theater or I watch it with them at home, I still don't know what the word means. So my presence doesn't change whether or not my child then integrates that word and starts using it, right? Because if I myself am ignorant to the meaning of the word, then I'm not quite sure how adding a PG rating changes that. So, like, it feels like it's sidestepping the issue to your point, like washing their hands of it. Well, we created this higher level of viewership, so now it's not on us if kids are running around the playground saying hottentot, right? It's really on the parents because you should have known. But like, what percentage of parents know that it is a racial slur referencing a group of indigenous people in South Africa? I mean, yeah, I feel like it's not, it's a solution that doesn't solve the ultimate problem, if that makes sense.
Right, right. No, it doesn't. I don't think it does at all. And, if it's a derogatory term, I'm grateful to now know that. But, uh, it's, I can hear the critics saying, in response to what you were saying before, yes, it's a good thing you're doing it and it's still problematic. I can hear the critics saying, your rating doesn't change anyone's knowledge. In fact, all it may do is shine a light on the racial slur now that we know it. And so now are we going to use it even more because we now know that it's problematic? And so, I still think, putting my business brain back on, I think this is where inclusion and whatever spirit that is used in, um, is being kind of appropriated in such a way to say, yeah, we know this is a problematic word, but we're also not going to take responsibility for educating you on that because that's not what we do. We entertain you. And if you run around with ignorant kids that don't know the meaning of this term, that's now on you. And we're going to keep playing the film. Right. So it's like the
Right,
rating,
right.
it's almost like it reminds me of y'all got to remember, I'm from Virginia. It kind of reminds me of those warning stickers that used to be, and I think still are. I don't know because I don't buy them. But the warning stickers on cigarettes, right? Where it's like, we're warning you. We're not telling you not to smoke. We're not telling you not to use. We're just saying that if you do, it's not our responsibility. Go forth. And so, I just feel like that whole accountability piece is all this is really
Yeah,
about.
yeah. Well, and who's going to notice, right? I couldn't even have told you what rating Mary Poppins had prior to this conversation. Like, I just know it's a kids' film,
Right,
so I wouldn't
right.
even have it. Like, would have been so out of my like range of knowledge around that. So the chances of someone even knowing that there's been a change up to PG is probably fairly slim. So nothing is changing, right? Other
Nothing.
than the British Film Board feeling better about themselves that they've called this out to this probably like very small niche group of people who are paying attention, but no one else really knows, and so the problem is not solved. Yeah, yeah. It the more we talk about this, the more I'm like, I don't even. This is not a useful move. It's not like it doesn't. It's not going to prevent harm being done with the word's usage if the word is used in an environment where people are knowledgeable about what it means, right?
That's right. That's right. And I, I think we have a light bulb moment going on here, Lisa, because I think this may be actually worse than performative behavior, right? Because performative is kind of like, and please let me know if you think differently. Performative is kind of like, we know this is bad and we're going to do something about it, and then we don't. Okay. So it's like, that ebb and flow. Like, we know it's bad, we're going to do something about it, and then we don't. This seems to be like a moot point performative piece because it's like, we're going to highlight this is a bad thing. We're going to wash our hands of it. And if you don't do something about it, yeah, it's on you. So it is truly like an empty, even an empty promise. It's like just an empty gesture. So one group is
Yeah.
knowledgeable,
Yeah.
and then there's nothing you can do about it. So we just move on. What the hell was this for? And so I know it
Yeah.
sounds like we're arguing against ourselves, but yet at the same time, we're saying this is something that could have deeper roots, but it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. It's got very shallow
Right.
roots. And so, the root of it is not too deep at all.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, what about, I don't know if this is a good idea or a bad idea, but what about like putting at the start of the film, you know, something that comes up and is like, parental warning, there is a racial slur utilized by this character in the movie. For more information, please visit blankety blank or something. Because then you're at least you're providing some education. So then the family, if they are so inclined, could go look that information up and then be educated about this. Rather, otherwise, they're just going to watch it and then it's going to go over their head, right? I mean, and also because blackface, right? White people wearing black makeup is so normalized in that time period, even though these individuals, chimney sweeps, are not performing as African or African American people, right? But that kind of performance is not for 1964, it's like everywhere, right? So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah,
Yeah, I think you're
yeah.
right. There's no roots. It's a little bit empty. Yeah, or a lot empty.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's empty. And I think to your great point, Lisa, I think that's a really great idea because I'm thinking about, you know, in this day and time, a lot of people use technology to get their movie tickets or to even to go see a throwback movie in a theater.
Mm-hmm.
You will use a QR code, like great example. So Despicable Me 4 is coming out in July, right? So the boys are excited about seeing Despicable Me 4. You have the Minions, and the Minions speak their own language, right? That type of thing. It's really fun. It's just, jibber jabber. What I think is interesting about that is I remember when I think Despicable Me 2 came out, there was a QR code on the screen that you could use your phone and scan it. And as the minions were speaking the minion language, it would interpret or translate the language to you so you could follow it along. And it was really cool. And to that end, all I'm saying is that if we have technology to interpret the mythical language of characters in
Yeah.
a children's
Yeah.
film,
Yeah.
at the very least we could do is send you to a damn glossary of slur terms so
Yep.
you can educate yourself on this topic. That's what I'm saying. So,
Yep.
if we're going to have the technology, to some end it could be used in a number of ways. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. uh
Yeah.
anyway, we need to help them
Agreed.
out.
Yeah.
There are so many people in
We
the
do.
world we could help out, Lisa. We could help them out.
I know. They just need to listen to us, hey?
Exactly,
um,
exactly.
all right. So with that, let's shift to phase two. So this whole movie thing is continuing because we decided to go down a movie rabbit hole. And Shaunna reminded me that back in 2021, Turner Classic Movies, which is a channel, TV channel here in the US, um, took a bunch of films that were made like in the before 1960, before 1950-ish, and replayed them, but provided education around why they are now, by contemporary standards or even by standards back then, are problematic, right? So, because many of these quote unquote classic films are horribly sexist and horribly racist, right? But if you're watching them in that time period, you don't necessarily understand that or know that because of the norms of the time. Or if you're a kiddo watching the movie, you have no critical analysis to the ways in which sexism and racism is working in the film, right? So we decided to look at some of these movies and talk about it. So one of the movies is The Toy, right? And this is one of Shaunna's favorite movies. I have not seen it, but
Oof. Oof.
you want to share a little bit about it and kind of now, kind of with that looking in the rearview mirror, like what you understand now that you didn't understand as a kiddo?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, so the plot of the movie, and this is actually not a super old movie. This movie actually came out, remember, I'm 46, y'all. This movie came out in 1982. Jackie Gleason and Richard Pryor both were in this movie. And it's one of my favorite movies, and still remains as my favorite movie. But as I learn more and more and more about inclusion and equity, it it would be pearl clutching and gasp worthy if anyone watched it now. So basically, the plot of the story is Richard Pryor is a trained, educated journalist, and Jackie Gleason's character plays the president or CEO of this newspaper. And Richard Pryor's character is trying to get a job as a journalist with this paper. And they're trying to say it without saying it that, look, you're Black. You're not going to be able to work here as a journalist. You can work as something else, but you can't work here as a journalist. And so I remember some of the funniest scenes around Richard Pryor applying to be a maid in this building of the newspaper so that he could hopefully get his foot in the door and then eventually evolve into a journalist. So he's got on like the traditional throwback black and white maid outfit, the uniform with this huge mustache. So it's clear that he's not a woman and he's not, so it's gender and race going on with that. And so he never gets the job as a journalist. Jackie Gleason's character discovers him as a maid, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "I'm trying to get a job, man. I write for a living, but you won't, they won't hire any, what's as journalists here." And so I had to get my foot in the door some other type of way. And so Jackie Gleason says, "I think I have the job for you." He hires Richard Pryor at the same salary that he would have made as a journalist as a literal toy for his young white male privileged son that's with him for the summer that needs entertainment. And so Richard Pryor is literally a toy. And he entertains him. And finally, by the conclusion of the movie, the son, the little boy, convinces his dad to give Richard Pryor the job. But the point being is that the entire premise of the story it wouldn't be a story if race wasn't the center of it. Back at how many times they said the N word, I look back at how many times they weaponized women in that movie and made it funny. All these things where then it was hilarious, and now it's like, whoa, I'm almost, uh, you know, putting myself on blast right now by even saying that's one of my favorites because it's just that challenging in today's context. So one of many, still one of my favorites, but yet looking back, Richard Pryor is an icon in the Black community, yet at the same time, problematic. Like there would be no way to
Yeah,
redo that movie in today's day and
right.
age because there would be no plot.
Yeah, yeah, like the racial dynamic is central, right? And it's interesting because I love Richard Pryor, but I imagine some of his choices, role choices, were both constrained by his race, right? And applauded and also condemned, right? Like I imagine that was a very challenging position for him to be in at the time that he was a big star, right? Because the 80s, not that long ago, but yeah, not a great era. Yeah, that's so interesting. I haven't seen that movie, but I did just look it up. So for me, the one on the list was Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. So this was a 1954 movie, and essentially, I think it's a musical, but there are seven brothers and they want brides. And there are seven women, they may be sisters, I can't remember, that live in the village. And then, but ultimately, one by one, the brothers kidnap the women, essentially, and coerce them into marriage. Although, of course, it's not presented as coercion, it's presented as kind of like Beauty and the Beast, right? Like, you're my captive, but you will fall in love with me and we will live happily ever after. And I loved that movie. Like, I watched it over and over and over again. I think I sung the songs. I have been familiar with the horribly misogynistic, not even overtones. I mean, it's like right there in front of your face, right, of that movie for some time, but it's on this Turner Classic Movie list of kind of reframing these old movies. And I'm a little disappointed that no one pointed that out to me as a child, right? That no one was able to say, had the forethought, knowledge, critical analysis to say, hey, let's talk about this movie, and maybe it doesn't have the best themes for girls or for women, right? Like, that
Yeah.
makes me sad, I think.
Yeah. 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 Well, yeah, I so agree. And, I even look back too, thinking that, you know, no one told me that these things were egregious. Like, you know, not
Mm-hmm.
using the N word was, we did not use that word in my house, yet at the same time, it was in modern media so much at that time that it's like, well, if you hear it, you're not offended because people say it. And so, that to me was interesting. Some of the undertones of movies like so the character I was speaking of before that Jackie Gleason played that owned the paper,
Mm-hmm.
some of the things that I looked back after watching it later on in life, and I'm like, oh my God, how did I miss that Jackie
Yeah.
Gleason's character's name was U.S. Bates, Ulysses S. Bates. I'm like, are you serious right now? And so, certain things that were right in your face. But again, as you learn and grow, I think it's a really good analogy for both of us where for those who are listening to this podcast right now, you may have lived a large portion of your life with people
Mm-hmm.
that you love and care about, that did not bring to your attention that certain things were problematic. And now you're looking back thinking that, ooh, all that stuff I used to laugh at and kiki at and things that were entertaining to me as a kid that nobody informed me were problematic in broader context. It's kind of like, what do I now do with my positive, happy memories of youth,
Right.
because they're so undergirded and supported by oftentimes exclusion, inequities, racism,
Mm-hmm.
sexism, gender is all of those things, but yet you're still sitting there with your fond memories.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it sucks, man. It
Yeah.
sucks. It sucks.
It totally sucks, and there's tons of movies on this list, so you can just Google it. Turner
Oh
Classic
my goodness,
Movies,
yes.
classic films in the rearview mirror, I think is what it's called, and you can see the list,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll probably find some on there that you hadn't thought about before. I mean, there's the obvious ones like Gone with the Wind, but there's a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
others that you may not understand what those problematic overtones are. And I'm even
Yeah.
thinking about Friends, right? So Friends is not a classic movie. Obviously, it was a phenomenally popular TV show. I love, 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 love Friends, right? But it's an entirely
Mm-hmm.
white cast, right? And I happened to
Mm-hmm.
watch a rerun about a year ago, and it's the one. There's the one where Monica ends up getting cornrows and braids in her hair, and then she gets caught in the shower. And at the time that her hair gets caught on the shower rings, right? I forget why she did that with her hair, but at the time I remember thinking it was funny. And then I watched it like a year ago and I was just like, "Oh my god." That is so it wasn't just the hair getting caught in the shower. That's just the piece I remember. But like
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
problematic. So
Yeah.
problematic. Right? Like an
Mm-hmm.
appropriation of a hairstyle that is extraordinarily meaningful.
Yes.
And then we think about all of the hair discrimination that you and I have talked about in this podcast with the Crown Act, right? And the ways in which this
Mhm.
kind of behavior was like minimized and was made funny. Like yeah. I mean, there's like oodles of it, right? And that was
Yeah.
1990s, right?
Yeah.
2000s.
Well, you remember, I don't know if you remember this when David Schwimmer got in a little bit of hot water because he was talking about Friend's predecessor, Living Single, where he said that Living Single, he felt that Friends should have an all black or all Asian cast to be in comparison to Friends. And Erica Alexander, who played on the predecessor Living Single, is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. First of all, you're not going to minimize our influence because there's been plenty of casts that showed versions of Friends that preceded Friends, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Living Single certainly was the predecessor to Friends. In fact, many people on the show Friends that played on the show said that they took some of the funny and some of the nuances of their character from watching Living Single. And so, even with that, it's like, damn it, what? Columbusing once again.
Yeah.
Columbusing someone else's experience is like, no, I mean, even Living Single can't sit there and say we're necessarily the first in everything. You always need to look back to see where you come into the stream of history. But to be
Yeah.
that flagrant, and these are people that are still living and they're still living off of royalties of the show that's still playing, and you're saying that, oh, there should be an all black or all Asian version of what you did, as if
As
that's
if
the
you're the
originator
first.
of the
Yeah.
idea. I'm like,
Yeah.
get out of here. Get out of here. That's not okay.
Yeah.
So and I really enjoyed Friends myself too, but again, it's almost like we have to relive,
Mm.
20, 30 years of entertainment now through a different lens,
Yep.
you know?
Yep.
So
Yep.
anyhow, oof. Well, look, since we're still on this entertainment, film, movie, TV kick, let's move into something that what is it called now, Lisa, when you're just mindlessly death scrolling on Instagram or Facebook, whatever it is, that's what I was doing. But every once in a while, Lisa, I run across a gym. Okay, let me tell you about this one. So phase three, I want everyone to run as soon as you get off this podcast. I want you to run, look in the show notes, look on our page, what have you, and you will see a link to a new Broadway show that just hit the stage in April of this year, called Suffs, Suffs. Okay. And I was just so enamored by the YouTube clip and the interview of Nikki James, who actually plays Ida B. Wells in this particular show. And so I'm hoping that Lisa can, like, jump a plane, jump a train, whatever she needs to do to get here so we can go see it together, right? But it is recalling the women's suffrage movement. And the reason why I think it's going to be so profound is that, I'm sure that I was at least an adult, probably, gosh, 25 maybe years ago, when my brain actually would parse out the right to vote amongst women, right? Because the overwhelming majority of people think that, okay, well, all women had the right to vote in 1920. Lion's share of people who have not studied their history will assume that, because that's usually what's in media, is that, let's broadly say, women had the right to vote in 1920. Well, excuse me, women who looked like me were not human beings until after that date, much less able to vote until after those dates. And so, with that, I think this particular Broadway show is going to be incredible, partially because it brings to life so many of the people who have often become caricatures in history classes and other places, because we've just minimized the lived experience of people like Ida B. Wells. I love that, gosh, the author of 1619, she actually uses the Twitter handle Ida Bay Wells, because her experience as a journalist and as a Black woman has been so heavily influenced by Ida B. Wells. So given that, I'm hoping that you all will get to see it. I'm hoping for big things, y'all. I want to go see it one time with Lisa, because I think we're just going to get a lot out of it. And then on the other hand, too, y'all know that my oldest son is a theater buff, and so I would like to go with him to see it as well, because I think he's just going to pick up on so many nuanced things that my brain may not pick up on as well. But y'all run out and check it out, because I think it's going to be a learn, unlearn, relearn moment for a lot of people who thought they knew what the women's suffrage movement was about, the conversations that were going on, even the tension, Lisa, that you and I try to name often on this podcast around, and I can recall you saying it many times and me saying it many times, that Lisa would say, as a white woman, this is problematic, and Shaunna, as a Black woman, this is extremely exponentially problematic. And parsing that out in real time as it was playing out in the women's suffrage movement, because as we know, Lisa, oftentimes when it comes to politics, you are unfortunately relegated to incremental improvements, not the ideal improvement that you want. And so in my brain, and forgive me for kind of creating my own fiction narrative in my brain here, I'm wondering if they're going to grapple with, for example, white women having a conversation saying, yeah, well, we want all women to be able to vote, but if it's all or nothing, then let it be us. Like those are the types of conversations that I'm wondering if they're going to illuminate on the stage. So anyway, that's the grappling and the nuance that we in today's society don't want to grapple with, but we have to. I can see some comparative conversations amongst various identities. And so I'll just slow down there. You can hear my excitement. I'm super hype about it. And they do have their
Yeah.
own YouTube channel. So go subscribe to their YouTube channel and check out all the snips and the clips of their rehearsals if you can't get out to the actual show.
Yeah, I haven't seen Hamilton yet, so it might be a while before I make it out to New York to visit you and see that. Although, and the train would take me days, so that's not going to be what happens. um, I'm really loving this reimagining of historical narratives that we're seeing in the theater, right? So Hamilton obviously is an example of that. And then Suffs, another example. And then I'm thinking of Six, which is a reimagining. It's the telling of Henry VIII's wives, but from the position of the wives, right? And then I think it was 1776, maybe. It was a recent reimagining of the play that talked about, that basically addresses kind of the Declaration of Independence and how that happened. It was a musical. And, you know, the cast of the new version, of the 2022-2023 version, is extremely racially and gender diverse, which obviously none of those folks were present at the table at the time of the Declaration of Independence. And the original play calls out northern states' hypocrisy around slavery and why slavery wasn't outlawed at the point of independence and then subsequently in the writing of the Constitution. But obviously, if you have a very racially and gender diverse cast in a contemporary time frame singing that same song around northern hypocrisy, it lands differently, right? Particularly in our current political climate. So I think this is, I mean, not everyone goes to the theater. Not everyone can afford to go to the theater. I mean, it's not cheap, right? So I like that with Hamilton, they ended up putting it on Disney, right? They actually videoed it. That's like they're there with a camcorder, right? A professional production on
Right.
television so that it could be a wider audience could see it because not everyone can go to the theater. So I hope that happens with Suffs, and I hope it happens with some of these other theatrical performances that are really, really pushing the envelope and trying to say, to your point, like, you need to relearn this history because what you've learned is whitewashed, right? And it is
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
absent all of these really important
Mm-hmm.
realities,
Mm-hmm.
large and small.
Well, and you're exactly right. And Lisa, let me be clear with you. If it wasn't for Disney Plus, I would have never seen Hamilton either, because I remember in unfortunate circumstances during the pandemic, Disney Plus aired Hamilton for free for people for like, I think it was like 7 days or 10 days or something. And it's a little bit long. So I watched the first half and then I went the next day and watched the second half. But that was the only way that I got to watch it as well. And so you're right. I'm hoping that, accessibility becomes a thing with this in particular. And two, Lisa, I'm thinking about, again, we're on this whole entertainment kick, the reimagining piece that you brought up. That's the reason why, for those that have access to Apple Plus and all of that good stuff, um, the show I was telling you about, the short series Manhunt that I was sharing with you about, because back, as my children would say, 100 years ago in the 1900s, when mommy was in fifth grade, I had to do a report. Every kid had to pick a president and do a report on the president. And so I chose Abraham Lincoln. And so I did my big report on Abraham Lincoln, learned all this stuff. Um, and again, whitewashed, not learning about the abolitionist piece of the work and not really learning anything that I needed to learn about the supporting cast around Lincoln when John Wilkes Booth was on the run. And so we're not saying that they're not using creative license here, because they are. Clearly, they are. They weren't there. There was no camcorder. There was no iPhone recording anything at the time. But the fact that we can, again, going back to our concept of freedom dreaming, brains being able to imagine what would this look like based on the change they were trying to create. And much of that story in Manhunt about hunting down John Wilkes Booth in that burning barn was about, yes, the voice of Lincoln, but then also the voices of other white male abolitionists that were around him, and enslaved voices that were also torn because, as much as Black folks today may want to say, well, I would have turned the whole place over and I would have da 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 da. It takes courage to do what our ancestors did. Some of them had brazen courage to the point of death, and others were afraid and said, I better go with this white man that's doing right by me and making sure I at least have food on the table. So given that, even that mixture of nuance amongst enslaved voices, that somebody's imagination went there to even have that conversation. And so I'm
Yeah.
appreciative that
Yeah.
someone's imagination went there. With Manhunt, with Suffs, I know that Hillary Clinton and somebody else is involved in the production. I need to look it up
Okay.
and see. But I know that I remember seeing a picture of Hillary behind the scenes on stage talking with someone. And so that women, people that are part of our community, came together.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were showing, it was this video of Nikki, the very first rehearsal after her Tony nomination. And of course, everyone was celebrating and, hooting and hollering and all these different things. There were women surrounding her, and they were from all different backgrounds and all different colors and all different experiences. And even just witnessing that tells us the amount of diversity that was amongst the production.
Right. Right.
So how we usually say, Lisa, in higher ed, it's, input, environment, output. If you never put a woman or people of color into a situation, the environment can't create
Yep.
anything that's inclusive or representative. And so the fact that they
Exactly.
started with that,
Yeah.
it's going to be incredible. So I'm loving this reimagining that people are helping us to figure out that we have been quite limited in our experiences and
Yeah.
understanding.
Yeah. So, with that, go add all of those movies and TV shows and theater performances we just listed off to your list of things to do. And in the meantime, where can folks find us between all that movie watching and theater going?
Did we just give them like their whole summer list of,
Pretty
film
much. Pretty
watching
much.
and, all
Yeah.
that? So, but yes, y'all have a laundry list of things. The show notes are going to be long this time, Lisa. But this is what you can do. And in fact, Lisa, we might want to just put together a watch list and post it somewhere for our followers. I think that would be cool. But anyway, if time allows. But you can find us on YouTube at Unfazed Unedited. You can find us on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Instagram, we are there as well. LinkedIn. If you have a question, especially when it comes to that word of the week, please send us an email to info@unfazedpodcast.com. And of course, our website where you can find everything, unfazedpodcast.com. Share, like, leave a review, all the good things. And definitely share this watch list with everyone in this phase of your life.